Hey folks, Scott Walters here. Welcome back to the Bulletproof Garage for episode 3 of Project Buckshot, the Dana 20 transfer case rebuild/reassembly. Now, if you missed episodes 1 and 2 for Project Buckshot, I'll put a link to those below in the description. All right, be sure and check those out because we removed the Dana 20 and the rest of the drivetrain in episode 1. We disassembled the Dana 20 in episode 2, and again in episode 3, we're going to go ahead and rebuild the Dana 20. So I've got my rebuild kit from USA Standard Gear. The Bronco's part suppliers are all probably carrying the same kit, right? The Dana 20 transfer case is completely disassembled, so let's get started. Okay, let's go ahead and tap in the shift rail seals. Starting off slow. Take a socket, right size. Make sure you tap it in straight. Okay, good to go. Now, before you start pressing bearings on, make sure you go ahead and inspect the gears. And what you're really looking at is going to be the teeth, all right? See, I'm not seeing any wear right here, but I am seeing some right here. And there are a few sharp edges. And I'm just going to spend a few minutes with a file and go ahead and take off the sharp edges, all right, because that's what may keep your transfer case from engaging smoothly. Again, we're not building a space shuttle here. We just want something that is going to function and it's not going to be super difficult to get it in gear, okay? All right, and you can see there's some wear here as well, but these are nice and rounded and I'm not feeling any sharp edges here, and everything looks good here as well. And I'm just going to use a small file to knock off the sharp edges. So I'm done. It took me about 10 minutes, and these are some of the worst teeth in this area right here, and some of them actually had been chipped. And so again, all I'm trying to do is make sure that the metal is a little smoother and you don't have any high spots that are going to grind or they're going to keep your transfer case from going in and out of gear. And you're also reducing a possibility that a crack is going to start in that area, all right, once you take down some of the metal and smooth it out, okay? A shout out to the folks on classicbroncos.com and the forums there. I posted up pictures of all the gears, and the consensus was, hey, those are fine. I've run worse than that, and this was the only gear that needed a little fettling or a little TLC, all right? So let's get moving with the reassembly. Okay, so I've got a press, but I know a lot of y'all don't. So let's see how far we can get with getting this thing together without using a press. We're going to make it easier by heating up the bearing, and that is going to expand the inside diameter of it, okay? And so I've got a little toaster oven here at the shop, and that goes in for 250 degrees at 10 minutes. So it's not recommended that you go hotter or that you go longer with that. And that'll be enough to make a difference. You just need a few thousandths extra, and hopefully it'll slide right on. All right, and I've got the shafts in here, and that is on dry ice, okay? So dry ice, you can buy that at your local grocery store. I think I got about $15 worth of dry ice here. And that is cooling those shafts off right there. All right, and let's see if I can get it on camera here. Well, I'm not able to get a temperature on it. Looks like it may be too cold to get a temp. But again, what we're trying to do is shrink the diameter on that shaft to where the bearing will just slip right on. And I also like to use a little psychological warfare. So we're not going to use this big Wilton hammer, but the bearing doesn't know that, all right? And the shaft doesn't know that. So you want to go ahead and scare them into thinking that if they don't go together nicely, that it's going to get really kinetic really quick. All right, and we're going to start with the rear output shaft. And as you can see, that sucker is nice and cold. All right, I got the right size pipe here. All right, and you heard the pitch change a little bit. That's a noise that it makes when the bearing's fully seated. And of course, I like to go a few more hits after that just to make sure. All right, that's on. One thing that I neglected to do the first time around is you want to go ahead and lube this bearing. All right, you don't want to install it dry. You don't have to pack it tightly necessarily. All right, this is assembly goo. I'll put a link below in the description, show you where you can buy it. So this stuff is specifically made for assembly of transmissions, should be fine in a transfer case, and this is going to dissolve once you go ahead and get the transfer case engaged and get these bearings spinning, okay? All right, speedometer gear goes on next. And then I've got 4 shims, so let's go ahead and measure these. All right. I'm going to call that 10 thousandths. Okay, 30 thousandths. 10 thousandths. And this is a thin one. Wow. 3 thousandths. All right. So we're going to go from, I don't think it matters which way you go. We'll go thicker to thinner. You know, the kit comes with these shims, but I'm going to go ahead and reuse the original ones. They're in good shape, so I don't see any reason not to use them. All right, let's go ahead and put the race in the rear output shaft assembly. And that's been sitting in dry ice. All right, easy day. Although I don't know if that's seated all the way. Let's see if it'll go in any further. There we go. Okay, let's do this one without using dry ice, all right? So this is the next race that goes in. And it should still pound in fine. All right, and again, you hear the sound change when it bottoms out, so that's when you know it's in. All right, now we can go ahead and assemble it. All right, so this sits down here like so. And then your bearing, and we'll need to press that on. All right, so we'll go back in the oven with this guy, and back in the dry ice with this. All right, there's a shaft that was in some dry ice. Fit like so. And now let's get the bearing out the oven. I got a pipe of the appropriate size. And that's it. All right, folks, let's talk about the Dana 20 yoke. In the early Bronco, you've got two different options, the Cleveland and the Spicer. Now, these are both Spicer, and you can see, hopefully you can see that. If you've got a Spicer, it's likely going to be stamped right here and right here. It's kind of faint, but I can see it, okay? And the issue is they're not interchangeable. Now, it seems like the Spicer is more common, but if you've got a Cleveland, understand that these aren't interchangeable, okay? And as you can see in the picture here, there's a few measurements and the configuration is slightly different. But we took a Spicer off, we're going back on with a Spicer, so we're good there. But there's still an issue here. This is the one I took off, okay? And in the disassembly video, I just took off the original type nut, but there wasn't a washer on it. And it didn't hit me until I started looking at my parts transfer cases and realized, you know what, I'm missing something there. And this is chewed up some. And, you know, obviously somebody's been into this transfer case at some point and they didn't put it back together correctly. So without a washer, every time you tighten down that nut, it's going to remove a little bit of material. On this one, you can see this surface is not chewed up, and there's a difference in depth from here to here and here to here. This one is significantly deeper from here to here. See if I can get a measurement here. All right, so I'm getting 0.128 here. And I'm getting 0.171 here. That's a fairly big difference. And you've got your O-ring that sits right here, all right? So that sits flush, and on this one, it protrudes a little bit, so it's a little bit proud of that surface, okay? And so going back together, we're going to use the washer that I removed with this yoke, all right? Certainly think that's original. And we're going to change to, this is an aftermarket nut right here, all right? And it's not chewed up like this one is, all right? This came off of one of my parts transfer cases that look to be freshly rebuilt, so we'll use that. And look, you know, you can buy new yokes. They're 50 to 70 bucks a piece. You can get forged yokes. We're not going to worry about that at this time. We're just going to go back with the best parts that I have on hand. And let's look at this washer. All right, and the washer is about 0.125, all right? I got 124 with an outside diameter of 1.5, okay? And your kit is going to come with O-rings for that. And the kit that I got did not come with a new washer or a new nut. You would think that it would, but you can buy that stuff, you know, from any of the Bronco suppliers. One other issue to be aware of is the yokes will wear down, all right? You can see here, from here to here, that's where the seal is going to ride on the yoke, okay? So that's a rubber seal, but over time you're gonna get dirt and grime and grit in there, and it acts like sandpaper, right? And it's actually going to wear down that surface over time. And so this yoke right here, I can feel that with my finger. So that means some material has been removed, and that's an opportunity for a leak, okay? So if you've got a pretty decent groove there, you probably want to replace your yoke. So this one has a bit of a groove, and this is the one that came off of the Bronco. Yeah, and I can catch that with my finger as well, okay? So that is a pretty good groove there as well. This is the one we're going to use, and you can barely tell where this has been wearing, all right? And it's nothing you can catch with your fingernail. So this is the one we're going to use right here. Okay, so now we're going to install the yoke and the nut without installing the seal, right? All right, so I've definitely got some in play here, but let's go ahead and put it in the vise and torque it down to spec. Okay, so you're supposed to torque it from 125 to 150. So I'm going to start at 125. All right, so that's $1.25. Now, if it's too tight when you reassemble it, it's going to be kind of obvious because it's going to be difficult to turn the yoke, all right? I'm having to apply some pressure there. So another way you can check to see if you've got it assembled correctly with the right number of shims is you take a beam style torque wrench and turn it Yeah, and it's taken 50 inch-pounds to turn the yoke. So that's way too tight. So if you get to this point, it's too tight, and I don't feel any end play at all here, then it means you need to add shims. Adding shims will decrease the preload and increase the end play, okay? So let's go ahead and disassemble and add some shims and check it again. Okay, so I just disassembled it after it was too tight, and what I had done prior to that is I had removed the thinnest shim, which was 3 thousandths, and I added one from my kit, which is 10 thousandths, okay? So I went 7 thousandths thicker, and my shim pack right now is roughly 60 thousandths, all right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to add another 10 thousandths shim, all right? So we should get 70 thousandths. All right, I'm getting, yeah, 71 thousandths or so. And then we're gonna reassemble it. Okay, I'm still not feeling any end play at all, but we are making progress. All right, I'm getting about 20 inch-pounds to rotate it, okay? So we went from what, 50 to 20? So let's disassemble it one more time. And I think I'm gonna go with one more shim at 10 thousandths. If I've got another 10 thousandths shim, I do. We'll go another shim at 10 thousandths and then see how that works. All right, actually I made kind of a bold move and I went to 15 thousandths, and I think I went too far because that doesn't seem to have hardly any preload, but let's check it. Yeah, that's not even registering. Okay, well, let's take it apart again, and I'll take the 15 thousandths shim out, and I'll see if I can't swap it with a 8 or a 5 or something like that. Okay, so I took the 15 thousandths off and I swapped it out with 2 4s. So now I'm getting about 82, 83 thousandths for the shim pack thickness, the overall shim pack thickness. And that's fairly big jump from what it had. I suspect that some of the clearances are off. You know, this thing was run low on fluid, and there was a lot of glitter when we disassembled it, so we may be addressing some of that wear that this has had over the years. Well, I think we're about there. All right, if you can see that, I'm getting right at 5. All right, right in between the spec of 2 to 9 inch-pounds. And we're going to call that good to go. Now, I think folks prefer the inch-pounds method versus the end play method. That is, you know, if you look on any of the Bronco forums, that seems to be the way to go. All right, so 2 to 9 inch-pounds being the spec, we're at 5. That is good to go. Okay, now that you're satisfied with either your preload or your end play, it's time to put it back together for good. Now, one thing before we get started, there's a lip down here that this seal is going to butt up against. The lip is 1/2 inch down, but your seal is about a little bit over 3/10 of an inch wide or thick, okay? So that means that your seal is going to have to sit down a little bit. It's not going to be flush. And the reason for that is you've got this paper gasket right here that goes in first, and the paper gasket is just going to sit on that lip, all right? And then we're going to drive this down. But before we drive it down, we got to do a little bit of prep, okay? First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to smear a little RTV just inside here. Give that seal a better chance of sealing up without leaking. All right. I'm going to take some assembly goo and I'm just going to pack the inner lip of that seal so it's not starting off dry. All right, that's good. I'm going to tap that in. And you can hear the noise it makes. It makes a slightly different noise when it bottoms out. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to coat the splines right here with RTV as well. All right, that's going on. And then the O-ring is going to sit right down in here. I'm going to take my washer. I'm using a new washer. RTV on the bottom of the washer. All right, and I've got a new nut. And we're going with Loctite Blue, medium strength. Run that down. All right, that's on the lowest power setting. And we're going to torque it to 150. All right, that feels good. Okay, it's time to go ahead and get the shift rails installed. First and foremost, I sourced some new shift rails from Tom's Off-Road. I think I got the first set that they sold. So these are OEM, and they were tough to find because most everybody makes shift rails for a J shift, but nobody makes regular T shift OEM shift rails. But again, Tom's Off-Road, and yeah, they seem to be well made. Now let's talk about the parts that we've got here. You've got new springs in your kit, and you've got new balls. The balls that I pulled out did not look great. They had some corrosion on them, and the springs looked okay. But the springs I pulled out of my parts case were broken, and so I didn't want to have to deal with broken springs this time around. So I went ahead and I'm using the new springs. Your shift forks are the same, all right, so you don't have to worry about mixing those up. And I've got 2 detent rods that go in. Now, let's talk about which rod goes where. It's easy to figure out. So basically, you know, you've got a 50-50 chance of getting it right, huh? Okay, so this obviously is going to go right here, okay, because that's where your flat bar is going to connect. And your detent balls are going to ride right here, okay? And so if the detent balls ride right here, those need to be facing towards the outside, and your detent rod is going to ride on this surface here, okay? All right, your detent rods are going to go in between. And so when you've got it configured like that, then you can see, oh, there's the hole for my set screw. Okay, so this is how they're going to be configured. All right, this one's going in this hole, and this one is going in that hole. All right, let's go ahead and install this guy here. All right, so what we're going to do first, take some of this assembly lube, lube it up a little bit. Okay, so once you take your shift fork, a little lube there, all right, and it's going to go in like so, and then we're going to take the shift rail, and remember the detents go on the outside, all right. All right, I don't know if you can see there. So I've got the shift fork and the shift rail lined up so that the hole for the set screw is facing up. I've got those lined up, but now I'm going to go put some Loctite on this guy. All right, I had to pull it out to get the Loctite on there and to get it started. Okay, I've got Loctite on the set screw, and I'm going to run it down until it's almost about to protrude right there. All right. Okay, and now I'm going through with the shift rail. All right, there it goes. Sorry about the camera work here. It's kind of difficult to get it to where you can see what I'm doing. But basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to proceed slowly, and I'm going to be wiggling the shift fork and the shift rail as I'm tightening. Make sure I get the set screw down in the right spot. Yep. And so you've got a little bit of play, and you're gradually going to go to no play as it tightens down. All right. Okay, now we are going to torque it to spec. And the torque spec on this is 10 to 18 foot-pounds, and I converted that to inch-pounds, and I'm getting about 180 inch-pounds. I don't have a torque wrench that'll do here, that'll go that low, but my inch-pound wrench will. So I'm going to about 180 inch-pounds, which is about 15 foot-pounds. Okay, so that is torqued to 180 inch-pounds with Loctite. So I don't think that's going to go anywhere. That took a fair amount of effort to get it down that tight. All right, so there we go. All right, one down, one to go. All right, let's go ahead and get our two detent rods in. If you've got a T-shift transfer case, you should have two detent rods. If you've got a J-shift case, you may only have one detent rod. All right, so let's get some lube on these guys. Go ahead and insert him. Lube on this one. Go ahead and insert him. All right, let's get those pushed in place. There, there. Okay, now for the next one. First thing, some Loctite on the set screw. And run the set screw down until it's about to protrude. All right, got that right there. All right, let's go ahead and lube. Put a little lube on the seal. Plenty of lube on the rail. All right, and then again, this cutout here is going to face the detent rod, and this end is going to face the detent balls when we install them. So let's go ahead and get that in. All right, I think I must not have one of the detent rods in all the way. Okay, I was able to get both shift rails in, but it took a little finagling. And at the end of the day, what worked for me is I had the shift forks installed but not tightened down. And then I just moved the shift rails in and out until I found the sweet spot, and now they're both in, okay? So sorry if I don't have like a step-by-step, this is how it works. But it'll just take you a few minutes of working the rails in and out and moving the detent rods in and out until you find the position where they're going to go in and to where you've got your set screw holes in the right position. Again, your set screw holes need to be on the top of the rod because that's where the shift forks are going to sit, okay? Okay, and this is what it looks like when you're done, right? You've got your shift rails moving freely, your shift forks are in, the set screws are tightened down to about 15 foot-pounds, and you've got the right detents on the outside and the right detents on the inside, and I don't think you can put this together backwards. I don't think it'll go together unless you've got it correctly configured. So if yours looks like this, you're going to be good to go. Okay, moving on to the front input shaft. First thing we need to do is press a bearing on right here. And I've gone ahead and I put the nut on for the yoke. And I've got it sitting in a socket here to protect the threads because we're going to be tapping it on here. Again, you can use a press, but I've got it in the oven right now for 10 minutes at 250. And we're just going to tap it on here in a second. I also inspected it. The teeth are in pretty good shape, but I went ahead and I hit it with the wire wheel just to clean it up a little bit. The bearings are going to go, one's going to go here and one's going to go here, and they are 14131, and the J shift takes different bearings, and you will have both in your kit, all right? Okay, and I've got a little bit of the transmission assembly lube here. Drop this guy on. 1.25" socket. All right, and that's on. And once this cools down a little bit, I'll put some grease on it. Yeah, let's put some on right now. Cool enough. Okay, so the gears for the front input shaft, you've got an 18/8/24 and you've got an 18/8/35, okay? Now you have a similar gear to the 18/8/35, just make sure you grab the one that's got a recess right here. These gears are actually from my parts transfer case. The ones from the original case were a little chewed up right here, and there was a tooth that had a pretty big chip on it. They were usable, but I'm going to go ahead and use the best parts that I have available, and it's going to be these. Alright, so I've been fighting shift forks for a while, so let me tell you what the problem was that I encountered and how I got past it, okay? So in theory, you should be able to install both shift rails and both shift forks, and then you should be able to rotate this fork right here forward to allow your gear to slide on. But mine wasn't rotating enough to get the gear on, so what I did is I just installed this shift rail here and the shift fork, okay? And now I'm going to take these gears. So this is your 18/8/35 gear, and you've got a similar gear, but this one has a recess right here. And then I've got my 18/8/24 gear, all right? Go ahead and slide those two together, and then you're going to slide the gear on like so. All right, the fork is going to fit right in there, and then that's going to rotate out the way. And then you'll be able to install the other shift rail. All right, you might have to do a little finagling. You're going to have to move your other rail in and out. All right, and there, I just slid it home. Actually, I got to put the fork on now. All right, and I'm going to torque this guy to about 15 foot-pounds. All right, so as you can see, we've got the gear on the fork right here. All right, we've got this gear sitting like so, and we've got the other shift fork installed, and everything is moving freely. Okay, let's do a little bit of a deeper dive here, and let me explain a little bit better what was going on. So, in theory, I should have been able to install both shift rails and both shift forks and the detent rods in the case and still be able to rotate a shift fork to where I can get the gear on it and then rotate it back into this direction. But the shift fork would only come about this far, right? And it wouldn't rotate far enough to where I could get the gear on. So what I did, and I tried it about 17 different ways, and it just wouldn't work. So what I did is I just installed one shift rail and installed the fork that I needed to put the gear on. All right, I did that without installing the detent rods, and so it moved freely in the case, okay? And I don't even think that I tightened down the set screw either. Anyway, and so then I put the gear on, and while the shift rail was still moving freely, I rotated it out of the way. And once that was out of the way, I was able to install the other shift rail the other shipped fork, and the detent rods, okay? Again, I'm not sure if I wasn't doing something right, but whatever the case, if you get hung up on that, go ahead and do it like I did, and you should be able to get there from here. All right, now we're just going to slide in our shaft, like so. All right. All right, now the race needs to go in. And I went a little bit past flush here. So I was looking at my parts transfer case, and the race on that was sitting a little bit down below the surface here, okay? Okay, thrust washer going on. It's got keys, so it fits on the shaft in a certain way, like so. And now the lock ring, our old friend. All right, lock ring is in place. All right, at this point we're going to go ahead and install the shims in the cover because we need to tap the bearing in. We need something supporting it on the back side. Okay, now we got our bearing fresh out of the oven. All right, oriented like so. Let me go see if I can find something to tap it on with. Just right. All right, that's in. A few more taps for good measure. All right, time to tap in the race now, and I smeared some assembly goo on that. Oh, well, I didn't need to tap that down at all. That just went right in. Okay. I guess it saw the big hammer coming. I scared it. Okay, now let's get the bearing retainer on. You've got a gasket, and we'll go ahead and do the belt and suspenders approach here and smear a little RTV on both sides. All right, a little dab will do you. All right, these get torqued to 35 foot-pounds. All right, good to go. All right, let's go ahead and pull the cover off now, and we're going to go ahead and seal up the shims. little brake cleaner. I'm using Permatex Spray a Gasket Sealant. You can use RTV as well. Everybody's got their special sauce here. All right, some of that. All right, torque it to 35 foot-pounds. Okay, now we can go ahead and slide this gear in. You may have to play with your shift rails, shift forks a little bit to get them to where this rail will move, so you can slide that gear in. All right, and that's in. All right, time for some more RTV. All right, and this gasket only goes on one way. All right, get a little bit more RTV on there. All right, now we're going to slide this in. All right, again, torque to 35 foot-pounds. All right, good to go. Okay, now we've got needle bearings. And you've got 1, 2, 3 shims. All right, so you got a shim on the outside on each side, and then you've got a shim in the middle. So we're just going to pack these guys with grease and set them in there and hope for the best. All right, I've got some more of the transmission assembly lube here. I'm going to apply it liberally. And I'm going to go in with the bearings. All right. That's one row. Get the spacer in there. That'll work. And we'll flip it over. Put some more assembly lube in there. Actually, when we get the other spacer in there, I'm reusing my original spacers. Yeah, the kit came with some, but these look fine, so I'm going to reuse them. So I've got 2 bearings left over. That's not good, but they all fit in there without any room to spare. Go ahead and run the shaft in there. Yep. There's no room for any more bearings in there. So I guess I just got 2 extras. A little more goop to hold the shims in place. More goop to hold the bearings in place. Okay, now we've got 2 thrust washers. The copper goes towards the gear. They've got detents on the back, so you can't do this backwards. And again, let's give it some more of this transmission assembly lube to hold it in place. All right, there's one. All right, that's 2. Okay, so I've got a new shaft here that I ordered with my kit, and they had 2 O-rings that came with it. One really small, which is what I'm using, and one kind of wider. And I think if you have a case that's designed to take an O-ring, and mine didn't have one, you go ahead and use the wider O-ring. So I went ahead with the smaller O-ring, and I'm going to go ahead and start the shaft in. All right, in the large part of the gear is going to be towards the side of the case where the shift rails are. I've got a zip tie here. I'm going to try to use that to help me drop this down into place. Let's see if it'll tap in. Right. And that's in. And it's going to be about flush right here. All right, let's go ahead and lock it in place. All right, good to go. Okay, let's go ahead and get our detent balls in. Put a little goop on there. It's in the hole. And a spring. I'm gonna go with a little dab of Loctite here. It's just not a whole lot of thread engagement. All right, and this one's just a plug. Same thing, a little dab of Loctite. All right, spin it around. Same thing here, detent ball, spring, Loctite, all right. Okay, now we can put the drain plug in. Yeah, I'm just going to put a little bit of RTV on here. All right, German torque, good and tight. And the fill plug, no RTV because obviously we'll be taking that out to fill it up. All right, good to go. Now let's go ahead and turn it over. And we're going to go ahead and get the bottom cover on. And I think you know what's coming next. Smear of RTV. Yep. Don't go overboard here. All right, gasket. This guy's nice and thick. More RTV. All right, I didn't see any torque specs for these bolts, but these are 5/16 bolts, and the usual torque spec for 5/16 is around 17 to 23 foot-pounds. I'm going to see what 15 foot-pounds feels like, or 180 inch-pounds. All right, I actually went up to 200 inch-pounds, so 200 inch-pounds is right at 17 foot-pounds. So I'm going to call that good. All right, folks, that is it for this episode of Project Buckshot on the Bulletproof Garage. Now, before I sign off, make sure and check out the next video. I think coming up next, we'll work on the intermediate housing that goes between the transfer case and the transmission, okay? Hopefully that'll be a quick disassembly and reassembly, but we won't know until we get into it. All right, signing off, but before I do, I have a few requests of y'all. Request number one, if you liked the video, you found it helpful or useful, please click on the thumbs up button down below. Doesn't cost you a penny, and it helps out the channel. Request number two, if you're not a subscriber, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Again, there's a button down below. That'll make sure that you get all the videos in your feed of the stuff we're doing here at the Bulletproof Garage, including a bunch more content than old Project Buckshot. Request number three, all right? Go ahead and post up a comment. I love to hear from y'all, all right? What did I do right? What did I do wrong? What did I forget? Or just check in and let me know how things are going, okay? I read each and every comment, and I try to respond to just about all of them. Oh, I almost forgot. Number four, poke around on the channel some. I've got about 50 videos up right now and a bunch more coming, all right? So I guarantee that you will find something else that you like on the channel. Okay, folks, as always, thanks for watching. And we'll see you next time on the Bulletproof Garage.